Thank you so much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to go on the first panel discussion of the day. Yes, a very wise and a thoughtful topic, and I'm sure it's very close to all our hearts. Impact of going green. The concept of green is no more about traditional materials and designs. Rather, it's an infusion of contemporary design and cutting-edge technology weaved into a fabric of urban landscape. And it's an honor for me to invite our speakers here on stage. With your round of applause, help me to welcome Ms. Jayashree Bhalla, Principal Architect, SE Arc. So could we have a round of applause? Thank you, ma'am, so much for joining us here. Could we also welcome Parul Javeri, Principal Architect, Abhikram. So could we have a round of applause? Yet another lovely lady joining us here. Also, please join me to welcome Shivaji Mohinta, Country Head, Green Lamb, one of our partners. So thank you, sir, for being here. And of course, last but not the least, to join the panel is our moderator, Mr. Nilesh Gandhi, Principal Architect, Meta Design. So could we have a round of applause?
Good morning, good noon. Good noon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I welcome you all for this panel discussion. And thank you, Babita, for the opportunity. And it's so we woke up today to Brexit and almost 1,000-point fall, and we still haven't recovered. So that was the jolt that we woke up today to. But there are things which will keep on. This will be one of an event, but we have the green revolution that we are standing at. And what I would like to set the tone is bring your attention to the COP21, where India has made substantial commitments. As rightly expressed, it is not a win or a loss for any nation, but the takeaways for India have been key on three accounts. One, India has committed to a 32 to 35% reduction in its emissions by 2030 against its 2005 levels. This seems to be still a fairly simple task to achieve, because over the last decade, from 2005 to today, we have already are at 15% efficient. So reaching that goal is fairly simpler. Another big commitment that India has made has to have renewable energy power of 175 gigawatts by 2022, out of which almost 100 gigawatts is solar. So that is an uphill task, considering that we are at a meager 5 or 10 gigawatt as of today. And the third key element that we have committed is to increase our forest cover by 5 million hectares, which is again a huge task for us. So in all this scenario, this is where we are heading to from today. But the green revolution, as architects, we have our own role cut out. So let me start, Parul, with you as to how are you approaching this, and how would you feel that, what would be your takeaway as responsible architects and responsible citizens? Where does the architecture industry stand in this game of climate change and the next decade?
It's unfortunate that we Indian architects are most irresponsible architects. You know, we are only looking at glossy magazines, and whatever is sold to us, the market. If you're a good marketeer, you can sell anything here to the architects here in India, architects and interior designers, which is a sad story. And in this scenario, seeing what Mr. Perry presented, and if he's here to do the smart city as an advisor, or even if his company is designing things, it's really a silver lining into these gray clouds. For many years, I would say, ever since we started our practice, we've been very conscious about doing green buildings, and actually we never gave it that name since '79. Yeah. And one of the major buildings that we completed was Torrent Research Center, and it started operations in 1997. And even today, it's supposed to be one of the largest passive cool building in Asia. Mm-hmm. And it's only, if I can just give you the figures.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The Indian energy consumption in 2004, the figures were 280 to 500 kilowatt hours per meter square consumption, and hospitals and malls were above 500. Whereas since 97, Torrent Research Center was operating at 54. And CO2 emissions normally at that time were 380 to 600 kilogram per meter square. And TRC was operating at 72. So,
That's
you know,
very sad,
yeah, and the amount of energy saved was almost 60,000 rupees a month at that point in time. And whatever investment the company made in making the building green or sustainable was recovered in 10 months. And in 13 years, they've recovered the cost of the building itself. And in 35 years, they will recover the cost of the investment made in that entire project.
Was it easy? Was it easy to?
Yes, I think we were very fortunate, the owners and the director, when someone presented to us, Brian Ford is an architect from Britain. And someone, a colleague who worked there, she came and presented to us the kind of work that they were doing, passive downdraft cooling. And we were very impressed. We had already designed this building and we were about to, we were doing the tender documents for that.
Okay.
So, but we said we don't mind doing, everything again if the client and the director agree to that. And they said, since we are the research institute, we should experiment first. And that's how we went ahead.
Then has Torrent helped you as an example for setting up the tone for your sustainable projects over the years?
Yes, very much so. And not only that, even our work in conservation, which opened up our eyes. The first project was in 85, 86 in Udaipur. That's where we started learning about all our traditional wisdom, traditional craftspeople, and local use of local materials, and how the whole thing developed, how our cities had developed, how our crafts had developed, and we always wondered, because my background was, my family lived earlier in the old part of Ahmedabad, but I was born and brought up on the newer part. So we kept on going for our vacations and functions to the old city, and even in summer it was so comfortable, you hardly needed a fan in those houses.
Sure.
And I always questioned that why is it that our newer buildings are not that comfortable? All the modern structures, and especially when we went, that was the time when Louis Kahn was doing IIMA, and as students we used to go there and users were complaining like hell. And we went to visit most of these buildings designed by great architects, even our professors, and there was nothing but complaints by the users. So that's another time that we decided that we have to build buildings which are user-friendly.
Coming to Jayashree, how has your approach been when any project comes to you? Where do you start, and what is your approach towards making it sustainable?
So, right at the start, I think my approach is to start really small. I look at things in a very precise way. And as they evolve, they may get larger, but I look at like 3, what I call S's of sustainability. Sensibility, just traditional wisdom, where it lies on the site. That's the sensitivity of the space and the scale. I try to make it as small as possible. I'm not looking at increasing the footprint. So if it is a housing complex, projects now in India are getting very large.
Yeah.
So to keep it small gets tough. But if we look at it in a very precise way, in a very innovative way, then the actual use of space, in a sense, can keep the entire area small. So if it's like, I also try to use the courtyard context.
Okay.
And it's surprising how a courtyard works, even in a small house and large, even if it's a mall. So it's very simple for me. I just lay it out small and lay it out simple.
But that's an eye-opener, because as I understand goes, footprint is something which is totally governed, is a client-governed entity. So how do you maneuver yourself to?
Well, yes, it is client-governed, but the flexibility of that footprint is architecture-governed.
Great.
So how you can make it usable for more people, that would make it flexible. So yes, the footprint remains the same, but the flexibility we can control.
Okay. Coming to you, Meenal, we have been chatting a lot about this. So please share us your views as to how your take would be to fasten this growth of green and to increase awareness, because I still see there is a wide gap between what needs to be done, where the path is so simple, but why does it seem so difficult? Yeah, it's all.
So I think what we do is we believe that seeing is believing. And wherever, in whichever projects we have completed, we urge our new clients to go and see what has happened. And like ma'am rightly said that, post-occupancy, it's very, very important to take a feedback on your projects. What is your project be functioning today? Is it functioning the way it is designed for? What is its consumptions? What is its footprint? So that kind of hard data is something that as designers and architects, we always shy away from. The feedback mechanism is largely missing. And I think that's why the conviction is extremely low, because we are not confident in convincing our clients. So the first thing that we always do is we try to tell our clients to go and see. We give them hard data. We even try to request our existing clients, please allow us to monitor your projects. So we don't walk away from the projects once the building is handed over. We try to stay with them for some time to understand what is happening. So I think that is the first thing that we do. The other thing I think we are stretching ourselves is we are trying to bridge the gap between any kind of engineering and architecture. So I think as designers, especially in our fraternity, we tend to stay only towards design. We really shy away from numbers. We really shy away from, the understanding of, I think numbers, graphs, calculations really intimidate us. And there's nothing to be intimidated. I think it's just a tool, it's a mechanism to be more take more informed decisions. And you can be more and more sure about what you're doing. So I think our practice has moved a lot towards validations using computer simulations, trying to stay with design studies and incorporate or embed all this right at pre-design stage. So there's a little more time that goes into design, but I think it's well justified because there's a lot of optimization that happens in the design process. So I think these two approaches is what we are trying largely to build this confidence and fasten the movement.
Coming to Shivaji, I understand as Greenlam you have an entire product portfolio and the architects demand, the market demands a certain product and then it is offered. So from the green perspective, what has been your product line and how are you approaching or satisfying the needs of the industry and market?
Right. Actually, the name green suggests that we follow a lot of green practices. And like that, the entire discussion about green architecture, sustainability, I think it's like more of we know what to do, but we don't follow it fully, like wearing a seat belt. You see, a lot of times we don't wear it, we just show to evade penalty and show that we are wearing it, but actually we are not. So it's something like that. It's a holistic approach which has to be taken, and as Madam said very rightly, that a lot of irresponsible designs are done, and we don't see what products are used ultimately because we are an interior surfacing product solutions company, and we offer products and the entire ecosystem. That awareness is still not there. What is being actually installed? Maybe specification level, you know that yes, green product, from where we are sourcing, where it's from responsible forest, what toxic levels, VOC. But then end of the day, when it is coming to installation at the interior level, it's color and tone matching and it's done. So the entire ecosystem is not aware, maybe the contractors, carpenters, or even if they are aware, then it comes to a position where there's a green premium, it's costly. So that CapEx versus OpEx thing also needs to be shared. So all these things, I think a lot of work has to be done.
So one aspect is about your product and one aspect is about the method in which it is manufactured.
Right.
So what measures are you taking into manufacturing the product more sustainably?
See, there are three aspects I'll talk about. One is our commitment to sustainability in the manufacturing process. There's a environmental policy and guideline, working policy which we have. And then the raw materials we use. From where we source, we are not only a responsible seller, we are also a responsible buyer. From where we buy the woods, no illegal wood is used in our company. We have the glue, which is water-based glue, with zero-level VOCs. Then we use sustainable products, like we use bamboo in a lot of our products, because which is harvested economically at a very fast rate. In 6 years, you get bamboo. Then we use cork oak, which only the bark of the tree is cut and used. So we don't cut the tree. Okay. So, and then the wastages, the recycle, reduce, all these things are done in our factory. So, and the last thing is the certifications. We are the only company in Asia who are Green Guard certified, Green Guard Gold, where it's useful for as an interior product in schools and educational institutions. We are certified by Green Guard, UL Laboratories, Green Guard Gold. We buy from FSC, that is Forest Stewardship Council, Forest, and these are all responsibly managed. We have PEFC certified, so all these certifications.
So other than these, Parul, how has the industry, how has the material industry supported you to go green or to use those products? Because the entire cycle chain, all that from tiles to floors, every industry has had to have a makeshift in their manufacturing to offer a green product. Recycled, which was a no-no 2 decades back, is the in thing today. So how has the industry helped you?
We maximize the use of natural products.
Okay.
So like we use more of wood and less of plywood, and laminates is very rare.
Yes.
So, and we try and use, tung oil or whatever oil finish based, and rather than other synthetic materials.
Melamine.
So even say say flooring materials are mostly stone or recycled materials, in the sense China mosaics, etc. So those are the things that we maximize with. So most of the time the dealers or the people manufacturers are quite scared to come to our office. Because we also do all the tests that they claim that authenticate that. Mm-hmm. So since we use also local materials wherever we build and local craftspeople, and as far as possible, there has been a place where we have got people, the workers, 80% of workers came from less than a kilometer of that project. So this is something we try and work with, and use as much local material as possible, except the sanitary wares and that. Even in our interiors, we try and locate the craft clusters that are around and give them work. So unless we do that, we have more than 85 crores of, craftspeople with us. And thousands of them are leaving their craft and getting into menial labor, just because we designers do not create work for them. And you already have that skill set, and on the other side, you want to create, institutes that are building up skills, whereas you're wasting away the energy and the traditional knowledge that has come down to them for thousands of years. So we try and maximize that instead of buying everything that's ready-made.
And Jayashree, what are, if I could ask you, what are some more of the out-of-box ideas that the industry needs to adopt, and what would you just throw some light on those?
So what I would ask a product manufacturer, if he would come into my office, is I'm not interested in how permanent your project is. Okay. I would like to know how it ages. Okay. Because nothing is permanent. If somebody is going to tell me this building is going to last for 1,000 years, I have a really tough time believing that. But I would like to know how it ages and how does it do so gracefully. That is important for me in a project. So natural materials, so traditional crafts. I think a building should be like a piece of garment, a natural garment. When you wear one, only then do you know how good it feels. If you wear silk, you wear cotton, you know how it feels. You wear rayon, you know how it feels. That's a building.
Coming to Meenal again, we have seen developers here in India, in Bombay, the exodus of developers towards foreign architects. We are not against those, but what is it that lacks in us? Of course, I have seen great drawings which have been generated, the level of detailing. So there's nothing wrong, it's an open market. But what is it, apart from a brand or a celebrity or something like that, which developers and foreign architects entice developers to go to? But what is it that we should do as architects, as a fraternity together, to address this particular, or to satisfy our clients home here, to be with local and Indian architects?
It's a tricky question, especially with
That's
Mr.
my
Perry
job.
here. No, I don't look at it like that. I think today the fraternity is not only a national fraternity, it's a global fraternity. And we all have to learn from each other. So if we are all, I think different parts of the world are at different stages of development. We are at a very different stage of development. And there are some countries who have already finished doing what we are doing today. And I agree with you that there are a lot of times that concepts are thrown at us which are probably not contextual, which are not native to our country. But it's just that because it comes from an already experienced or already done area, the belief is probably there more. And I think, you know, it's not about just architecture. It just happens in any field or any fraternity. So, you know, anything that is more progressive seems to be right to us. So it just is that what entices them. I don't think there is much missing between us and them. I think we are equally competitive. We are equally knowledgeable. All of us have grown, and I think rather than looking at each other as competition, we should look at each other as complementing. Definitely complementing. So there is nothing wrong in learning from things that they have already finished accomplishing rather than repeating the same mistakes.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I'm sure when they come down here, there is a lot that they would take away from us too. So I think rather than looking at it from that, it should be looked at more positively.
Okay, sure. And how has your...
I would like to
yeah, sure.
add to that, yeah. I think the client should be aware that just putting themselves totally in the laps of the architects or interior designers who come from abroad, they should also have an Indian architect or interior designer telling them, holding their hand. So both ways there is a learning, localization happens, and that's what has happened with us with the Oberoi hotels and other places. So they learn from us and we learn from them, and they acclimatize themselves, and then that's how they've started using Indian crafts, and then they take them even abroad where they actually work.
I agree with you because having worked abroad for a few years, stayed abroad for a few years, I really think we should take this as a global friendly community. Let's not look at them as being a threat or us being, because even we've gone abroad and worked, and nobody has outcast us there, or nobody has set us apart. Nobody has looked at us as a threat. So I think it's your talent and how you want to grow healthily together as a community for the world as a whole. Let's just look at that for the world as a whole. And ma'am is right. I'm sure the understanding of localization of those concepts is very important. So a local person has to be on board on those projects.
Jayashree, on awareness, how would you think we should address the issue of making this a mass event rather than a very, we need to push down green to clients, so, and the awareness gap. So what do you think should be done to make it as a self-driven and self-motivated, as a self-event?
I would be very cautious first in how to make it a mass-driven event, because everything mass has its dangers and we can see it happening around it. We have to put up our skywalks and then bring them down and then walk on the ground. So yeah, smart cities, when they started off, we were all very cautious because of the way they were projected. And now, after understanding it from Mr. Perry's presentation, it's, that much more enthusiastic. So I think we have to be very cautious about how we project the environmental, sustainable aspect.
Yeah, please, all yours.
Sorry. Our experience is slightly different because in Udaipur, when we were evolving policies for conservation of that city, we walked, every week we would go, or every 10 days, just walk and talk to people and really get the feel of the place. And we realized that unless conservation becomes a mass movement and it has a snowballing effect, it cannot go on. And that's the effort we started in '87, and today we see the results in whole of Rajasthan, that so many workers have come back and there is so much of conservation work that's happening. There are so many heritage structures that have been revived, adaptive reuses that have taken place. And we used to always say that you use your traditional local craft person, he knows everything because they have very high values, and their ethics are also very high that it's difficult for even professionals like us to match with their ethics. Their understanding of the material and local conditions are very good. So you take them, you understand, and see, we don't do interventions in buildings, you know, and ruin that whole homogeneity of that city or a town. And these people know exactly, you know, the geometry of whatever they're doing, building construction, they know far better than us. So we always tell our client, you know, we are working with you. Then you work with this craftsman, and then you help others down the street. You don't need us. Actually, you should have minimum of architects, you know, advising you. You yourself are a designer. And once you do that and give them that confidence, it takes on the mass movement, and that's where your conservation occurs.
Jayeshi, I agree with you that mass movement has to be a cautious, has to be done very cautiously. But also there is this fact that we today are using what we have inherited across generations that has been done. But what are we creating today for our generations to come forward? Our buildings do not have a life beyond 60, 70 years today. They are being brought down in 20 years because of redevelopment. Forget 100 years lifespan of a building. So what is it that we are creating, or rather we should create for the generations to come? And where should we do the mindset change? People are so much worried, and rightly so, about their tomorrow, that worrying about their day afters or 2030, these are all numbers, 2030, 2050. Who's going to live that day to see? So how do we address that?
I think again it would be good to go back to the traditional sort of sensitivity of the building in going back to the natural materials which age well. So it goes back to that area of intervention in design, where you have to look at a building from various different perspectives and not as just being there for posterity. In its flexibility, in its use, as it ages, as it, for example, like the conservation effort that's going on in Rajasthan, the buildings were built earlier as palaces, or they were built as homes. Today they are being used as hotels. So therein lies its beauty for how it has aged.
Okay. Meenal, disruption is the buzzword today in the market. You wake up in the morning and you need to be aware that whether our market exists or no, whether an Ola or Uber has been converted out of our market. So how and where do you think that we can create an Ola and Uber about our industry? Is there a chance for it? The established business models are nowhere, no more the day you wake up. Models built across generations are overturned overnight. Decades of business generation is wiped out over a 5-year or a less than span of period. So is there an opportunity that lies within the green building industry to create that kind of a win-win situation, is what I'm trying to ask. That we wouldn't need to hard sell, we wouldn't need to push down, convince so much to a client that the paybacks are 2 years, please go for solar, save water, use these equipments, it's sustainable, look for your children. Am I
Yes, I hear you. I just, okay, I'm going to try and frame this. So I definitely don't think we are far away. Okay. I firmly believe, I think if I wouldn't have stuck with this entire practice for a very long time. So I do agree it was a struggle earlier. It was much more of a struggle, and especially I'm sure when Parul ma'am started or Jayashree ma'am was working with this kind of concepts, not many had those approach and philosophies. But if you believe in it, it's, you know, creating awareness, and it's building the fraternity. So if you strengthen the fraternity towards convincing people that this is a reality, and then when we have some kind of top-down approach from the government organizations, where they also feel that, they are committing, like you rightly started off with COP21, committing XYZ number of emissions. It needs to somewhere, from top down and bottom up. It has to somewhere match up, and commitments have to be made by everybody, and we all have to grow in terms of the way we approached our practice. We cannot approach our practice the way we did 15, 20 years ago. 15, 20 years ago, proprietary firms worked. Today, it doesn't. So there is a lot of change in the market in terms of business model. I do agree with you. However, I think somewhere we all have to do this top-down and bottom-up approach to meet up. But it will happen. We don't have a choice there, Nilesh. We really don't have a choice. It's a ticking bomb. So it's either going to be today or tomorrow. So we didn't have water this summer, we didn't have water last summer. So now we know that most of our clients are getting more and more aware. Electricity, I think most of our clients who have finished many projects, including large-scale interiors, are cribbing about energy bills. So the next thing that they want is, again, audits to be done and retrofits to be done. So, it's before they realize that you cannot approach it after, you cannot go and dissect a problem after you create the problem. Yeah. You need to address it at design level. So it's going to happen.
Shivaji, for you, is it a totally market demand that you are addressing, or what kind of initiatives are you taking to create awareness among those architects who are not so aware about a sustainable green product? So is it again a both-way street, or a market is demanding a green product and you are offering it?
No, it's not a two-way street. I think still this is a niche category where they know green products or they demand green products. But if you see the entire again ecosystem, there's a lot of challenges we face while going and convincing them that why to use green products and how they are sourced, how they are made. So I think again awareness is the key. That's a key challenge, is awareness. And once it goes mass and people understand that it's the only option available, there are no other options available in future, then only I think it will catch on.
And I'll ask a cliche question. Are those expensive?
It's not. If you compare apple to apple, it's not.
Please.
I think media and education too have to play a major role in doing this, reversing this. They've taken it on one side and now we have to bring it back. Intentionally, we were told by one of the directors of Engineering College of Baroda that we were forced to use cement, and Britain, they had to sell their cement. And that's why they intentionally removed all the chapters on lime construction, and people were not allowed to build in lime. And it is similar to what people were the farmers had to use fertilizers. It's similar story. And we also have that here. And we have to make people aware that what you knew was good, but we have to make it better. And that's where even the prices, everything, your competitions have to lead to genuine green buildings and make the people in rural areas realize that what they had or what they still have is really good. The way Ayurveda worked in a way of preventive way. And allopathy is only solving a problem at that point in time. There's something wrong here, you cut that finger. But not how you resolve the whole issue. So we need to get back to that. And even at education level, we have to get back. It's not just architects, even engineers have to be roped in and make them aware. So our conferences and meetings should not be just of architects and interior designers.
Go down to
or landscape designers. Again, in landscape design, we need to again start using our indigenous plants. I'll just tell you two examples of one hotel that we have done in middle of desert between Jaisalmer and Jodhpur. And there we had a landscape designer from Mumbai, and he has used all indigenous plants, and in 2 years it was lush green, and it has stayed that way. It's grown. Whereas another hotel that we have done beyond Amer, in Rajasthan again, but it's more green than that place, Dechu. We had a landscape designer from Delhi. And probably they did not know much about the indigenous species, and after they planted everything, it was green for a couple of months. And when we had the summer, it was all gone. We just had barely 20% of the plants remained. So we need to put in those pieces, we need to put in our Ayurvedic plants, we need to really get into that and insist as architects, also from landscape designers. And clients have to be made aware that that was the right thing, that you planted 2 trees when a child was born, and those 2 trees were teak, so they could use them, that was the tradition. Then you always had Ardusi and Tulsi and, all those plants which are part of that. Even I remember as a child that everyone had those plants in their garden. So we go back to that and tell people that that was the right thing to do, not necessarily what comes from West is the right thing.
That's right. I would like to bring Jayashree your attention to academia, where how are we percolating, taking a cue from Parul's comment, how are we percolating this to the budding architects of tomorrow, to that 5 years of rigorous course that we go through. How deep are we? In my personal opinion, we are still at a very superficial level. So what things should be done to get them more involved, and as well for some kind of continual education activities for architects?
Tough question. My son has just finished 5 years of architecture. So yes, there is a lot to be done in that field. And there is a lot being done as well.
Okay.
Architecture, as we studied it, has come a long way. There are many, many other integrated courses, integrated curriculum that is there that introduces, say, for example, landscape architecture or interior design much earlier in the curriculum. They are more aware of local native plants than we were. They are more aware of traditional building construction techniques than we were. I definitely see a positive change. Definitely more needs to be done. There need to be more SEPs. We haven't seen anyone coming up in the recent past. So yes, and on the previous discussion on the products, I just want to say that we are going in a very band-aid direction. There's a problem and we solve it, and then we have 2 or 3 other companies coming in to resolve that problem. And why was that problem in the first place is very, very rarely addressed, or it even goes back into history and people forget about it. So there, yes, I do agree with Parul that we should not go into a band-aid approach, but into a more sensitive, sustainable, more informed, innovative approach. Yeah.
Minal, I would need your inputs on continual education for architects as such. Like today, as architects, we need a mechanism desperately to have that kind of a model wherein we are updating our knowledge on a continual basis. So, could you please throw? Yeah,
Like RIBA.
Yeah, of course.
Like RIBA.
Yeah, absolutely. Like either it's RIBA or IIA or even LEED, as for that matter, who are LEED AP, USGBC LEED AP here. To maintain your credentials, to maintain your license, you have to do continuing education. And continuing education is also, it's been defined by them. The courses are defined by them. You have to choose. It's not that hard. There is enough flexibility offered. Things are online. Things are given to colleges. Courses are held. Conferences are held. Like, say, for example, if Council of Architecture would hold a conference with certain amount of, discussions or talks and etc., that would be counted as some credit hours towards continuing education, because it's knowledge dissemination, knowledge sharing, it's upgradation. So I think it's extremely, extremely essential for all of us to figure out some kind of mechanism for continuing education. What I've seen in other countries is that it's probably happening only because it's enforced.
Mandatory, yeah.
And it's made mandatory. So till the time it's voluntary, I think very few of us are going to go towards that all the other time. And because it's extremely hard with a practice, working all the time to actually, voluntarily go for it. So there has to be this culture developed, there has to be this mechanism that we have to create.
But similar mechanism does exist in the chartered accountant fraternity or
Absolutely.
for that. So it is not something that it is unheard of or something absolutely new, and we are at parallels to the industry.
Yes.
So probably your license revoked if 50 hours of annual training is not conducted.
Yes.
Should be acceptable by the fraternity for their own good.
It should be.
Council of Architecture does not even revoke any licenses if their rules are not followed. even in competitions, right? And even when you write to them.
You opened a Pandora's box.
Yes, I am opening a Pandora's box and I'm not afraid of it.
Sure. Parul, how has technology helped you into making green building projects? Have you embraced technology, because with the kind of style of work that you do, it is more of rustic, natural, you're working with those kind of elements, but how has your take on technology been?
We assess the technology for what it is, where we need it. We definitely use it. But we don't get awed by technology. You know, it cannot take you over. You are riding the technology. Technology cannot ride you.
For it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You have to look at that and then use it very judiciously. Today, it's like new materials and technology. It's like those toys that you give to a child, and they want
use
to
explore.
explore.
Or misuse.
Yes, and that's the way we are behaving. So we have to be, once we are satisfied, we have to get back to.
Jayashree, if I may ask you to have some closing remarks, and then I think we are.
Closing remarks.
Yes, please.
Well, it's been a wonderful session, and just interacting with Parul. I've never met her before, and so my living room at home is a little smaller than this living room. So I hope the conversation has been, symbolic in a sense where currently we stand today. We've all come through the traffic jams of the city to be here, and it's a very, very current topic, sustainability in its wholeness and whole sense. And thank you for for calling us all here. It's been good.
Yes, I thank ITP for inviting us and organizing something like this. I mean, this kind of conference and panel discussion, and giving us so much time in panel discussion. And Mr. Perry had really set the ball rolling.
Sure.
And you have done your homework, which is seen in this, which is really good, which is not the case most of the time. And that's what leads the panel discussion in the right direction.
Thank you so much. So we have some time for quick questions, but yeah.
So thank you, Babita, if she's here. So I was roped in at the last minute. But yes, thank you organizers for having us here. And it's really wonderful. I think it's always very intriguing, rewarding, and a learning experience to be on any panel discussion, because you're sharing views with your peers. There are a lot of inspiring points that you always pick up. So there's always a takeaway for people like us, and I hope there is something.
Yeah,
it's a learning curve, and I hope we contributed to everybody out here. So thank you.
I think.
Yeah, there we will learn those.
Yeah, I think it was very insightful and educative discussions, and the points raised by you was also very relevant in today's context. I think moving forward we can.
So we'll throw the forum open for questions, please. Yeah, can someone spread these mics around? Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
I'm not from the architectural, Anil Vanwari. I'm not from the architectural field, but I look after a market called MIPIM, which takes place in Cannes, out of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. So one suggestion about, rather than calling it green, healthy living is one possibility, and having credits for the architects, having some sort of credits which would help the architects, the young architects, start thinking about healthy living for the individual. Is that something which you all would agree?
Yeah, totally. I do.
Anyone else, any comments on that?
Yeah. We would agree, definitely. I think all of us would agree out here.
Absolutely.
We couldn't not agree.
Yeah.
So who's going to set this up, the credit thing for architects? Who's going to be behind? Who's going to do it?
Talk to Indian
It is a
Institute of
tough road ahead, because as we spoke, getting the fraternity to accept some kind of a credit system, we have lived our way into this particular freedom, so-called, not being mandated to do something like that. So it is going to be tough. Inertia is going to be our biggest enemy, but we'll have to work around with organizations, with the policymakers, with stakeholders, with the council, and set the ball rolling somewhere.
You set the tone when you said India has agreed to certain standards of health and improving our pollution and other things. You set the tone. So Somebody's got to get the ball moving. Who is?
I think today, Indian Institute of Interior Designers is a very powerful group, and they're very active. And one can start with them. And they are now trying to work with the educational institutes as well as the authorities. So that's where one should start.
Have a green certification for all you know, if you're not ISO 4000, whatever. Anyway, I've done my bit. Thanks.
Thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, could we have a huge round of applause for all our panelists? Of course, Go Green as a thought has always been etched onto our minds. And today, as they shared their time and their valuable thoughts, it's only reiterated onto all our minds. So could we yet again have a round of applause? And I request Mr. Shivaji Mohinta to please kindly felicitate our panelists here on the dais. So let's hear it for Jayashree Bhalla. Could we have a big round of applause? And thank you, Jayashree, for joining us here. For Ms. Parul Zaveri, could we have a round of applause? Thank you, ma'am, very thoughtfully that you've presented the Go Green to us. And let's have a huge round of applause for Ms. Sutaria. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. Of course, we just got you in time, and it was wonderful to hear it all from you. And a big round of applause for very ably moderating this wonderful session, Mr. Nilesh Gandhi. Thank you so much, Nilesh. Thank you. Thank you so much. Request all of you to please.